Welcome to the Economy Magazine at I-24 News, where we provide a daily view on world markets and the global economy. I'm Natalie Ehrlich. Arab-Israeli innovation blossoms in Nazareth, but not without challenges. And 10 years after Katrina, the U.S. state of Louisiana still in financial recovery. Let's start now with the headlines. Well, the Shanghai Composite finished 0.8% lower Monday. Other Chinese benchmarks, like the Shenzhen, saw even sharper falls. The Nikkei followed China's declines, ending down 1.28%. Reports over the weekend suggest Beijing may stop its controversial market interventions. And other world markets seem to read that badly. The DAX opening down 0.77%. The CAC down 0.79% at the open, though London's FTSE up 0.90%. Dow futures tanking more than 200 points. Goldman Sachs lowered its projections for Chinese economic growth. On Monday, 2016, 2017, and 2018 forecasts revised to 6.4%, 6.1%, and 5.8% respectively, marking yet another setback for the Asian powerhouse. Meanwhile, China's problems also weighing on Israel's economy. The Israeli credit insurance company says a downturn in China could make it harder to collect what Chinese firms owe Israeli exporters, estimated to be some $700 million. A study by global credit insurer Eller Hermes, which owns ICIC, gave China a 76 out of 100 for difficulty in collecting debt. Meanwhile, Italian energy giant Eni says it has found a huge offshore gas field in Egypt. The company says it's the largest nat gas discovery ever in the Mediterranean. The finding could complicate Israel's sale of its own gas resources as further supply enters the regional market. In the U.S., meanwhile, the Fed seems on track now to raise interest rates by the end of the year. Despite the turbulence in equities and economic problems in China, the Fed continued to cite an improving job market and economy at the central bank's annual economic symposium in Kansas City. Thanks to falling oil prices and a strong dollar, inflation remains low. Well, Fed policymakers are waiting for inflation to climb back to their 2% annual target before starting to hike rates. Shifting our focus now back to this part of the world. Israel's startup culture takes a foothold in the birthplace of Christianity. Shelby Weiner reports from Nazareth.
Nazareth, the cradle of Christianity, and now some may call it the cradle of Israeli Arab business. The country's largest Arab city is home to a new initiative for the economic development of minorities. Arab-Israeli business makes up less than 2% of Israel's booming high-tech sector. 3/4 of Arab-owned businesses are located in the north, far removed from the country's center and the heartbeat of the startup nation.
The community and the place and the ecosystem is not mature.
But the city is transforming. Nazareth's industrial park opened 2 years ago with the promise of creating 1,000 jobs in the next decade. And the Israeli government budgeted over 700 million shekels towards the economic development of Arab sectors.
I think it's very important at this stage because it's basically the first fire that could ignite the whole system. And without it, probably the engine wouldn't start working.
Government subsidies help fund incubators, accelerators, and the startups themselves. A single grant can cover 55% of R&D costs for a company's first year. The money is needed for many of these projects to get off the ground. Some say investors are hard to come by when you're an Arab in a Jewish state.
To invest in Arab startup, it's not just to check the idea and let's say the market, the potential, and so on. It's also to check more and more the entrepreneur himself, because he's an Arab.
But the investment issues don't end there. Israeli Arab companies are stuck between a rock and a hard place, facing problems doing business with the rest of the Arab world.
Some of our entrepreneurs are already working in the Arab world, but they are not working as Israeli companies. They have to register themselves in, let's say, West Bank or in Jordan.
Startups are forced to register outside of Israel, and many eventually choose to relocate, thus moving the industry and stunting any possible growth for Nazareth's budding ecosystem. It's clear that Israel needs to do more to encourage Arabs to become a part of the iconic startup nation.
Continue our discussion on Arab-Israeli innovation. We are joined by Alan Weinkrantz, Rackspace brand ambassador to Israel. Thank you very much for being with us today.
Thank you for having me.
Well, as this report details, Arab-Israelis are both encouraged and burdened by their association with Israel. What's your view?
My view, in fact, I've I've spent a lot of time there. It does exist, but I think there's always workarounds. I would actually counter some of these statements because I have a friend of mine that runs a home decorating business out of London, but she actually lives here in Israel. She answers the phone with a British accent. I think there's always workarounds, and I think that, yeah, there's these issues, but a lot of Jewish businesses that operate in the Arab world, and I think we're living in a global economy that, politics aside, it's just business.
All right, so you think that politics stays out of business?
For the most part, it does. I think if people choose to politicize these issues, great. That's just a universe that I choose not to live in. My experience of being in Nazareth, being in East Jerusalem, I meet amazingly smart, wonderful people that are doing cool things all over the world.
All right. Well, you have this really fascinating article that you have posted in the Times of Israel about Israel's next unicorn economy. Please explain for us.
So I think that one of the things we celebrate a little too much is, typical story, a couple of young guys or, a man and a woman get together, they start a company, it grows, a few years later they're bought by Intel or Microsoft, or they go IPO and they become a unicorn company, it's $1 billion exit. I go, that's great, wonderful, those should continue. But I believe there's another parallel, again, a parallel universe of another, what I call a $1 billion economy that's going on anyway. I think we just need to recognize it and open our eyes to, there's companies that are doing great things here. They may not be $1 billion, but $1 billion represents 1,000 $1 million businesses. So if you do some of the math, I would almost take the latter than a single exit at $1 billion that maybe celebrates the wrong thing.
All right. So spread your eggs in more than one basket.
Yes, absolutely.
There are also other initiatives that we're seeing in the Negev and East Jerusalem. Please describe those to us. Sure.
Well, aside from what's going on up in Nazareth, last week I was at an event in East Jerusalem. It's partially funded by the U.S. State Department. They're bringing together Israeli and Palestinian entrepreneurs. They're creating new businesses together. It's wonderful. There's I won't name the company, but there's a VC-funded company in Jerusalem doing very well. All their coders are in Ramallah. The political stuff does go on. Sometimes the Palestinians don't want to be seen as cooperating, so you kind of be creative and you keep it a little bit under the radar. But I don't think this place owns the franchise on doing business this way. Next month I'll be in Berlin. There's a lot of ties with Israel and Berlin, and you're going to see a lot of immigration, because of some of the Syrian refugees. I think that is another universe that I think is potentially a wonderful place, because I think that now we have this power of the cloud, these inexpensive technologies. These businesses are really going more mainstream and downstream, where the cost of going into business is almost nil. A little bit of hard work, a little bit of luck, you can create another $1 billion ecosystem.
All right, so technology seems to be transcending these barriers. Thank you so much for being with us.
Thank you for having me.
Ellen Weinkrantz, very much appreciate it. Moving on now to the rest of our coverage. 1 decade after Hurricane Katrina, Louisiana reportedly still recovering from some $150 billion in damages.
Hurricane Katrina, a storm unlike any other, slammed Louisiana with Category 5 winds, leaving destruction and despair in its wake. A decade later, and the state is still recovering from the estimated $150 billion in damages. New Orleans was devastated after the levees broke, which many believe only happened because of budget cuts and poor planning.
The Army Corps of Engineers was looking for ways to save money, and so at a savings of $100 million, they determined they only needed to drive sheet piling down into the levees 17 feet instead of 50. And during Katrina, these walls fell over on both sides.
10 years later, and the new levee system is almost complete, costing $14.5 billion. But steel and concrete isn't the only form of storm surge protection. The area's wetlands provide vital defense as well. But the environment is in dire need of restoration. Ironically, another disaster is helping fund the efforts.
We have monies that are going to be coming through from the BP oil spill. We can put that towards coastal restoration. And it is a really sad opportunity, but it's also a very unique one that could actually help us out a lot.
The state of Louisiana received $6.8 billion from a BP settlement deal in July, Most of the money will go towards the $50 billion coastal restoration and protection plan, but fortifying the city against future storms is only half the battle.
What about us? What are you going to do in terms of repairing the streets, funding money, getting us, some type of funding from the federal government to help us rebuild our home and come back? Because there's a lot of people that want to come home, but they can't. They just can't afford to.
Many neighborhoods still bear the hurricane scars, especially the poorer African-American districts. Racism, poverty, and crime have been plaguing the city of New Orleans long before the storm.
We now have to really get into the historical problems that the city had before Katrina. Income inequality, heavy dose of blight, still plagued with some fairly serious violent crime in certain neighborhoods of the city.
Only 34% of the predominantly black Lower Ninth Ward have returned. Many families are too poor to rebuild what they lost. New Orleans' population as a whole is only at 80% of its pre-Katrina population. Louisiana is still facing a long path towards recovery.
And for the stories we didn't want you to miss, we are joined on set by Gabby Weineker from Media Watch. Thanks for being with us. What did you bring today?
Hi, Natalie. I want to start with something that makes headlines daily, the Islamic State. They're actually minting their own currency. It's their latest propaganda tool, and their coins include gold and silver. It actually marks their one-year anniversary since they declared a caliphate. So this could be seen as a move for trying to establish a functioning state and show that they're working outside the confines of the US. It's also to maybe bolster morale after several losses in the field, including losses to the Kurds, again, and also by US airstrikes, coalition airstrikes on their positions. They actually released this in a very interesting video where they give a very distorted interpretation of world economics. Let's have a look.
With the permission of Allah, the oil will only be sold for gold, not for Federal Reserve banknotes or any other fraudulent note that the Tawaghit have imposed on the people. And in order to realize this objective and the great Shari'i goal of protecting the people's wealth, the Shura Council of the Khilafah tasked the Treasury of the Islamic State with returning the true and ultimate mediums of exchange and Shari'i measures of all goods and services for the Ummah through the minting of the silver dirham and the gold dinar.
Again, very striking. Here they're speaking in English.
This is their latest propaganda. I think they released the video in many languages. But what's interesting is the exchange rate. It may shock you. So one 21-carat dinar coin is equal to $139. It's very expensive. Its weight in gold is actually 4.25 grams, so it's huge. But actually their exchange rates are quite meaningless because no one's going to trade with them.
Right.
They're actually still paying their fighters in Syria and Iraq using US dollars. So I'm not sure how much this is going to be used. And if it is used, it's only going to be used inside Iraq and inside Syria, territories that ISIS control.
All right, so a big PR stunt and also perhaps a morale booster within their own territory there. What else did you bring?
Something much lighter, Datanomics. It's a new book that's out this week, How Dating Became a Lopsided Numbers Game. The name may remind you of Freakonomics, a very popular economy book. A man called John Berger, the author, says it's not your fault that women are finding the dating game difficult. While people are blaming technology, things like Tinder and everything for making the dating game hard, he says it's actually due to the ratio. It's not you, it's me, it's the ratio. There are more women than men. So although in the US, it's about 50-50 split, turns out the ratio shifts when you look at college graduates by gender, and actually women are 20% more likely to graduate, which really leaves them with a huge man deficit, which is very funny.
If they want an educated man, at least.
Well, that's actually one of his tips. He gives 8 tips in his book for how to get over this. And one of them is to find a mate, and college-educated women should consider dating working-class men, somebody without an education. He says in the future we're going to see what he calls more of a mixed-collar marriages. So this is good news for the dating world. Look into the book.
Standards. Good
Indeed,
news.
exactly.
What else did you bring?
Africa brain drain. The brain drain is when the best talent leaves the country. So it's an index which shows the country's capacity to retain their top talent. And it actually has a direct impact on economic growth. And at the same time, brain drain also can show how much you attract top talent. So a report by the World Economic Forum talks about global competitiveness in this report released this year. Turns out Burundi is least able to hold on to top talent. Could be down to the political turmoil, could be down to economic factors. They also have a very small population of only 10 million people, which gives them a very small pool from which to choose their best talent. So a lot of people in Africa are leaving the countries and giving their talent elsewhere, looking for better jobs, more financial opportunity. Alongside Burundi, we also have Algeria, Mauritania, Chad, Guinea, and Zimbabwe with the highest rates of brain drain.
Well, thank you very much for bringing this to our attention. That wraps up our show today. Stay tuned every day for your global business coverage. I'm Natalie Ehrlich. Thank you for watching.